I am Tammy, and welcome to today's class. I guess you could say today's call. I'm actually going to do it like that. There's a lot of light in here today. Actually, there's a skylight right above me. Um, what I wanted to speak about today is adulterated oils. Specifically, last week I addressed phthalates, which is in my reference table that I put together. And it's based on my own it was research that I did after my own personal health issues between breast cancer and an cystadenoma is what they called it. Eventually, they called it an endometrioma at first, but it was bigger than any baby I ever had. Let me just put it that way. But the bottom line is there's something going on in our environment, and we can get into this place of like, I'm eating all the right things, I'm eating right, I'm exercising, I'm doing all these things. I meditate, I take time. And while I can't say that these things aren't effective, each one of us actually comes to the table with our own unique epigenome. And that's really where I'm coming from. So I've been doing this for 40 years or working with oils. It started in pharmacology, studying epigenetics, studying nutrigenomics, psychology, neuroscience, and just it kind of just starts to come together. And I have personally been my own test monkey, if you will, because everything is happening and how can I make the best of it? So, what I've lived through is what I bring to the table here. And yes, oils are a factor. And I have used oils for very many years, like I said, nearly 40 years. But the question becomes if I'm doing all the right things and I'm even using oils, at what point I'm no longer a fraud, because that's what it feels like. It's like I'm saying all these things, but why is this still happening? And this is where I came to understand through this most recent experience that the ovaries and the testicles are like little mini universes that can become a firestorm. And in my case, that was when they were still doing, and they still thought it was an endometrioma. And endometrioma is not unlike endometriosis. It just happens on the exterior of the ovary compared to the outside of the uterus. That said, mucinous cystadenoma, which is what I ended up being diagnosed, and just for the record, it is benign, or it was benign. The tissue in that is epithelial. In fact, it's not unlike the lining of our digestive tract, which really got my attention. So, kind of give you a little context here or some background. Back in 2015, I developed a program called Breaking the Cycle of Disease Management. I didn't really like the name, but I had a few people sign up for it. In the work that I did to develop that program, and it is still available. So if you're interested in that, let me know. Um, but that said, in the process of that development of that program, I discovered, like I said, it was 2015. I came upon recent research at that time on the stress response. I've since have written a report on this in the last year on steroidogenesis, which is really the stress response. It is the stress system. The reason I emphasized recent research is because they only began to see this system back in 2012. So it was something that I happened upon, I should say, during the development of that first program. And it's fair to say that I have run with this because no matter what, when it comes to oils, something that I've become accustomed to saying is you've got to think about long-term effects. So it's about knowing what's in your oil. Yeah. Knowing the chemistry of these oils. If you take note of my writing and you watch me or listen to me speak, there's multiple varieties of lavender. There's multiple varieties of rosemary, multiple varieties of chamomile, cedarwood, thyme, basil. So many oils have multiple varieties. And even then, good example, another one is frankincense and helichrysum and marjoram. So there's multiple varieties of a species, and then you've got it, which is now compounded by where it's grown. So there's a big significance to what you're actually using. Some oils, while it may be, and like I said, meditation and exercise and eating right, this may work for some people, but it didn't work for me. And the reason it didn't work for me 100% is because we are all wired in our own unique way. For a fact, the DNA. Well, let me back up a minute. So, Dr. Barbara McClintock. So, I'm kind of giving you some insight into the program that I did. Dr. Barbara McClintock, back in the late 1930s, early 1940s, she and her team discovered what they call transponal elements or jumping genes. These are segments of the DNA that are able to alter themselves, like adjust, relocate is the word I'm looking for. They have the ability to relocate spontaneously, which means it doesn't need any particular stress for this to happen. It just spontaneously happens. This happens prior to conception and germination. This is what they discovered back then. She finally received a Nobel Prize for this. I believe it was in the 1980s. Thank goodness. Because it was her discovery or their discovery that really prompted the continual work of Francis Crick, James Watson, and their team on the double helix and how the DNA actually works. And it also did foster the Human Genome Project, was really about studying the human epigenome. And this is the part of our genome that is known for adaptation. And I can't say that enough. The epigenome, the stress system, is in fact a system of transformation. It is how our body adapts. Nothing is ever permanent. And how your system spontaneously generated itself from conception is unique to you. This is why neutral oils affect the person in the same way, and why no form of stress relief is good for everyone. It depends on your system. It's really about getting to know your body. So my work that I teach when I teach here at the community college, and I'm also teaching at the University of New Mexico now, is how do we find comfort in our body? And the reason I talk about adulterated oils is because knowing number one, knowing the chemistry of what you're working with, and it really isn't complicated. And I can teach you how to do that. That is what we get into when we're talking about the next two levels, the different paid tiers, because understanding what you're working, how to personalize is the first step, but understanding the chemistry and how you can apply this to other people is really where the light shines, because it's no longer about how do I fix my body? It's about how do I support its adaptation. It's about the fluidity as opposed to the control and rigidity of fixing a symptom. But in order to get there, in order to understand when we understand the chemistry, we have to understand what adulteration is. And so through my journey recently again, and endocrine disruptors, and 80,000 have been identified of endocrine, or I should say environmental compounds that are affecting us in one way or another. And well over 1,000 of them are confirmed endocrine disruptors, or actually, they're all endocrine disruptors. But more importantly, over 1,000 of them have been confirmed as estrogen, or estrogenic rather. And so that's an important component to this. And I just finished up a talk in the UK on ectopic olfactory receptors, and this is something that we can get into further, more, in more depth in other programs. But I will just touch on this. And ectopic olfactory receptors are not in the nose. They are on the skin and throughout the entire system. There's well over 400 functional ones that they absolutely know are influencing the way our epigenome processes information. And the purpose of the ectopic olfactory receptors is it sends signals to the brain, and it helps the brain to regulate itself, whether it needs to be on alert or if it can be at rest. And what I like to say, rest and receive. When you rest and receive, you're able to digest your food because the digestive system is now functioning as it's meant to function. There is no such thing as a defective body. There may be breakdown in it because of chronic inflammation and oxidative stress, but it doesn't mean the body's weak. And when we introduce genuine oils, oils that are not adulterated, we can now be on a regular basis. It's not just a short term fix. It's like when you start to introduce them every single day, you get to the point where you can now begin to assist your body with, I guess you could say, resetting itself, regulating itself. So, that all said, the significance of phthalates most specifically was in the research that I pulled, because again, you can have that reference table if I think I uploaded it, but if I'll double check. Um, on that table, what I showed you is number one, the type of type of compounds, how they affect us, and what areas of the body. I mean, where they're coming from and how they affect us. And phthalates, it is said, is found in fragrance. Now, that's generally what we consider to be natural fragrance. Natural fragrance is not the same thing as a genuine essential oil. It's oftentimes modeled, not unlike a pharmaceutical, because a pharmaceutical is modeled after an organic compound, a plant compound. But in this case, a natural fragrance is typically modeled after these fragrant notes within essential oils, the scents that we like, the scents that we buy by, if you know what I'm saying. The ones that the reason why when you get an oil, maybe you got it. I was having this conversation the other day with someone. Cistus labdanum is a really good one. It's very kind of musky floral. And he says to me, "Well, this isn't real cistus because this is the kind that I like." And I go, "Well, it's just come from a different part of the world." So as I said, there's multiple varieties, and where they grow affects the ultimate oil that is produced. So your scent can change. The change of a scent doesn't mean it's adulterated. So I want to just kind of quickly touch on this, because an adulterated oil is not going to provide the same level of regulation or reminder to the body. Again, the ectopic olfactory receptors are detecting our environment 100% of the time. This is what connects us to one another. This is what connects us to the environment. Is our body is literally breathing in the compounds around us. So when you have 80,000 compounds around the world that are in our air, in our food, in our body care products, in our household cleaners. It's in everything. In your receipts. Wait do you see that on that reference table. They're in everything. Your body's going to be on high alert consistently. That stress response is going to be chronically active. The olfactory receptors, let me say this again, is what they do is they let the brain know, pardon me, if there is a need to be on high alert, if there is a need to be in fight or flight. Because if there's not, then you want to be able to rest and receive. I am not suggesting that we use oils as a means of calming the body. I'm suggesting that we actually use the oils in a way that assists the brain with self regulation to be able to know appropriately it is time to be on alert. And there's times that the stress response needs to kick in. That's your menstrual cycle, that's the reproductive cycle, that's your sleep cycle, that's your hunger cycle. These are all forms of stress. So there is types of stress that the body needs to be able to jump into if you've been hurt or if there is a threat to your livelihood. There's a need to be able, you don't want to be just chill about everything, right? So it's not about, again, using oils to, I mean, they do help, don't get me wrong, but it's not about getting them them to relax us. It's about using them to inform our brain and reminding our brain how to regulate itself. So that's the most important piece. And again, they're throughout the entire system. It's not just they're not in your nose. Your nose is different. It is not the olfactory receptors in your nose. Well, none of them actually are filtered by the thalamus. It is our only sense that is directly affects the brain. And what it does is if you're in the rest and digest state or the rest and receive state, then you're able to self-soothe. And that is the whole purpose to this. So I often talk about oils and the chemistry and how they can influence the various hormones and neurotransmitters in our brain. At the same time, the the primary takeaway to this is we want them to be to actually help with the neural pathways and let the brain do what it's designed to do. And let I mean, because we're detecting these chemicals all the time. But the more that we can make those shifts back and forth from fight or flight to rest and digest, the easier it is for the body to begin to detox itself. And the epigenome is more efficient when it comes to adaptation and detox again, as well as digestion and the use and assimilation of nutrients. You cannot use, and that's one of the things I love to teach about, is oils are not enough. They are the signaling molecules that notify our receptors that, in fact, they can be at a state where they can use these nutrients. But it's not helpful if you're eating a crappy diet. So, nutrient-rich foods paired with genuine essential oils on a daily basis that kind of work with your system now allows the system to do what it's designed to do, as I've said. So, an adulterated oil is one that has been well, I mean, we already know it's, chemicals, right? Those could be the synthetic ones, those could be the ones that are they've identified the fragrance molecules and they've added extra esters to it. If you get an oil from the company that if you're used to getting a company oil and it smells the same consistently, I would ask questions. I mean, unless, of course, you're getting an oil so frequently, they're just giving it to you out of the same batch. But generally, the batches are going to change just a bit because the growing season changes. We have no control over the weather. That's one of the biggest reasons why essential oils are not regulated by the FDA. They cannot control the quality of the oils. So, understanding what your oil consists of, where you're getting it from, and but more importantly, getting a GCMS as well as a COA. That's your gas chromatogram and spectrograph, as well as mass spectrograph. That's the MS, GC gas chromatogram and mass spectrograph. Um, and then your COA. And your COAs, the GCMS typically doesn't come with every batch. They usually have them on file, and but the COA has to come with everyone. And it's the COAs that are actually going to let you know whether or not there are phthalates. And recent research has discovered that 22 well-known essential oil companies all came up with phthalates in their some of their oils that showed up on the COAs. So this is really very important because they're not supposed to be in there, which means they're coming through another means. And one of the other things I wanted to mention is that there are essential oil companies that are also producing skincare, body care, hair care products that are chances are using scent from because there's a lot of companies out there that produce natural fragrances and they're purchasing these, but they're not genuine oils. And in those types of fragrances, that's considered an adulterated oil, an adulterated fragrance, because chances are it's going to have phthalates in it. It just naturally comes with that. So this is a couple of ways. So one of the ways I do it is, and this is historical. I don't know how much they're doing it these days, but one way is you have let's just say a field of lavender, and the buyer expects lavender to smell the same, right? Every single batch. So they will spray esters on the field prior to harvest so that they can seal in that scent. That's one form of adulteration. Another form of adulteration is actually cutting. And what I mean by cutting is, say, for instance, sandalwood. It's an expensive oil. And so oftentimes they will cut it with cedarwood oil. That is an adulteration. Maybe two genuine essential oils, but they're using cedarwood to minimize the cost to you. Because another factor that influences your purchase is the cost of an oil. So in order to keep it attractive, they will cut oils with other, peppermint is another one. Corn mint actually has more menthol in it than peppermint, but they'll cut it because it's to maintain that menthol smell because that's what we're used to. Again, cedarwood and Sandalwood are often done like that. Jasmine's another one. So there's a number of oils that are genuinely, and I use that lightly, altered as a result in order to sustain cost and the aroma. Another way of adulterating oils is it's rectifying them. And what I mean by rectifying them is that they will distill them multiple times to remove certain constituents. And so they're isolating, they're making a more concentrated form. And although it started out as a genuine oil, a good example of that would be yarrow. Yarrow is typically blue. It has that camulzine in it. But if you get a yarrow that is clear, I've seen it also happen with blue cypress. I've seen it happen with calendula, that they've rectified it so much that it only has it's not the full oil. So you're not going to get the same effect. To get the full effect of an oil, it has to be a whole oil. So rectification is really where they're eliminating certain constituents by over producing it, over processing it through distillation. And another way of adulterating oils is by, again, like I said, mixing oils. I know there's a particular company um, that they're not doing it, like I was saying, to kind of like for fragrance or for price. They're just doing it. And I got this straight from their employees, the people that work or represent them. They have their lavender and their eucalyptus are blends of multiple eucalyptuses and multiple lavenders. That's also adulteration, because when I'm talking about and teaching about oils, and a lot of other aromatherapists are, we're expecting an oil to be 100%, but it's not the same when you mix, in this case, we'll just say French lavender with Bulgarian lavender, with spike lavender, and possibly lavandin. If you start mixing all that, you've got multiple oils in there and a slew of chemicals that aren't going to produce the same influence on the system as as a true lavender would. So that is another form of adulteration. But again, the most important one as well is the fact that one of the things about plants that we don't frequently talk about, and I discovered while I was doing this program, is that they will use plants for what they call soil remediation. And what that means is that there are heavy metals in the soil, and plants will actually extract the metals from the soil. And this is happening all the time. They can only go as deep as the roots go. But they're getting metals out of the soil. And the purpose of this in some organizations is to actually extract metal. They want to create the metal. But if that's said, we want to make sure, again, on those COAs, that there's not any trace of heavy metals. Generally, those don't pass through the distillation, but you just want to make sure, because I have actually checked out a couple of websites with oils and have actually found some heavy metals in some oils, specifically in peppermint. How it got there, I don't know, but you really want to take a look at those COAs. If you want an example of a complete COA, let me know. I could certainly provide that for you. But those will actually show you what is in fact adulterated and what is in it and how authentic that oil is. So I hope this helps you. If you have any questions, by all means, let me know. Until then, I will see you next week. I'll come on live. I'm not sure what I'm going to talk about next week, but I'm sure I'll come up with something between now and then. Until then, take exquisite care.